Live.
We're live.
We're live. Let's go.
Hi, I'm Adam Harling. I'm Managing Director of Nettitude, and I'm here with Dan Bolton, who's one of our strategic advisors.
Yeah, I'm a virtual IT director, so I work with clients to discuss IT strategy going forward. Yeah.
And part of that is cybersecurity.
A lot of that is cybersecurity.
So today we are covering 7 cybersecurity trends. It's a broad subject, so let's get stuck in. Today the agenda that we're going to cover is types of attack, for what we're seeing in the field. We're looking to take some mystery away here, kind of simplifying it and making it, taking away a bit of the smoke and mirrors from cybersecurity. Ransomware as a service and how that works. Small business cybercrime and how it affects small businesses and what we're seeing, and specifically what Dan's seeing with our clients. The cost of an attack, so how much does it cost for an SME to suffer a cyber attack? The changes we're seeing in cyber insurance policies and insurance requirements, working from home and how that has changed the cyber landscape, and the arms race and how we're staying ahead of the cyber criminals.
Yeah, and along with that, yeah, we will be going through what businesses need to do, what you need to do to protect your data, what we're doing in response to the trends that we're seeing as well in the industry. Yeah, and as Adam pointed out, how we are also looking towards the future, making sure that we have that covered as well.
Yeah, staying ahead. So let's get on. First thing you want to do is demystify. You know, you think of cybersecurity and you have the hooded guy with a black background and lots of numbers, and it's being really de-skilled. A hacker doesn't really have to be that skilled anymore to attack a business. And we'll go through cybercrime as a service and how that works in a second, but really we're talking about 2 main types of attacks. The primary is ransomware, and this is an attack whereby your systems are infiltrated and your data is encrypted. And that means you can't access your data, you can't open your Word and Excel files, you can't access your database system, and the attacker will demand a ransom to decrypt your files. And you pay the ransom, you get your files back. That's ransomware. The other type is business email compromise.
Business email compromise. So the way that this attack works, it works very differently from ransomware. So ransomware is heavily dependent on some development work, so some understanding of the sort of technical, the technology
to write software.
To write the software. Whereas business email compromise is very dependent on social engineering. So they'll use urgency is, for instance, a tactic. You know, you have to click on this very quickly, or you know, some way of manipulating people into doing things that they wouldn't normally do. Once they've gained access, they then are able to send emails on your behalf. And obviously, the way that they use this is they will send invoices with changed bank details to your clients. So they'll be paying what they think is a genuine invoice, but actually the funds will be sent, redirected to the attacker.
And we'll also see internal attacks. So you might have an email from what looks like an email from the managing director to the finance director saying, "Pay this urgently," and you know. But a lot of people fall foul to that and end up paying, you know, large quantities of money over to the attacker's bank account.
Yeah.
So really trying to demystify what we're seeing, and as a trend, it hasn't changed. These are the primary attacks that we're seeing as we see it in the market and with our clients. These are what we're worrying about.
Yeah.
So moving on, I've alluded to ransomware as a service. So let's move on to that and understand what that means. So ransomware as a service is what it's doing is removing the development requirement from the attacker. So if you think about it like Shopify, back in the day, if I wanted to start an online retail business, I'd have to understand how web servers worked and build an e-commerce platform and work out how credit card payments worked. And it's a lot of kind of infrastructure to build up. Now I can go to Shopify and I can start an online retail organization very quickly. I upload photos of my products and they do all of the background work for me. They do all of the web development, they do the credit card processing. This is what's happening with ransomware. Criminal organizations are building sophisticated platforms to deliver typically ransomware. So they'll write the virus and they'll make the payment platform available and all of the infrastructure that goes on behind that, because quite complicated and it costs a lot of money to develop it. And they're making that available to people further down the food chain. So for me to become a hacker, I can go to the dark web, I can purchase a virus for myself. All I've got to do is find an organisation to target and run that program on their network.
Actually, it's worse, isn't it? Because you don't actually need to purchase it.
No, it's actually free. It's actually free.
It's free.
Yeah. So, and the way this works is if I can get a business encrypted and I can demand a ransom, say I demand £100,000, I'm going to get 10 to 20% of that £100,000 as my payoff for carrying out that attack. The master organisation collects the vast majority of the money, but they've done all the work, they put all the investment in. Because you have to think about this as a business. They're making good money, so they have very good programmers that are always looking for ways around antivirus platforms, firewalls, people, etc. So what it's doing is de-skilling that process. There are a vastly larger number of attackers because
it's much more accessible.
Much more accessible. Yeah. So those master organisations are disseminating that ability down to a lot more people, and therefore a lot more businesses are being affected. So that's ransomware as a service, and that's a trend that's really developing. They're getting much more sophisticated, more money's going into those platforms, and they're becoming much more available. So we can see that in the trends on attacks.
I think it's also important to mention that, when all of this happens, every time a ransom is paid as well, it just makes it worse. It makes it worse because these ransoms fuel the industry. So 5-10 years ago, you'd see these, you'd hear of them, but you wouldn't be talking about the sums of money that we are now. And it's just been these small amounts that have mounted up, and now we're talking hundreds of thousands of pounds. So it really has grown as an industry all of its own. Ransomware as a service.
So that's a big trend. It's not going away, and it's growing. Next thing we can see is that these attacks are going upwards. The average ransom payment is, some of these stats are in dollars. The information on statistics are usually just supplied in dollars. A lot of the industry works in dollars, so that's where the stats come from. You can see that the trend's going upwards in both cases. The average payment going up, but also what's more interesting is the median ransom payment, and that's because, you'll notice that's lower. And that's because the far number of the attacks are on smaller businesses and demanding smaller ransoms. So the average will be driven up by the large attacks. So the Colonial Pipeline in America or Uber recently will be the higher ransoms. The lower ransoms form or are a far larger number of those attacks. So smaller businesses are being targeted. How is that affecting small business? Well, what we can see is, if you look at the graph on the right, the size of company is going down. Now, why is that? You'd think if I was an attacker, I'd want a big business that can pay a large ransom. Well, first off, attacking those large businesses attracts the attention of people like the FBI and the CIA, and the hacking group that carried out the Colonial Pipeline attack have now been jailed, and it means that they are much more likely to be found and prosecuted. So they're now steering away from national infrastructure
It's high risk.
Yeah, much higher risk for the attacker. So if you're an attacker, you want to stay away from that. I want to target smaller businesses with less resources and probably more of them. So that's what we're seeing in that trend, is that the size of business is going down. The other part is smaller businesses generally don't have as much resource to put into cyber mitigation. So they're less well defended, easier targets.
Yeah, you see it, the enterprise size businesses, they're going to have far more advanced mitigations, backups in place, just purely because of the amount of money that you're talking about in order to
but they can afford to defend themselves as well. So
you have small businesses much more low-hanging fruit.
And we're also seeing a slight change in the types of organisations that are that the attackers are focusing on. So manufacturing, local government. So we're seeing, I think there was about 2 or 3 months ago, there was an attack on a county council that disabled their a lot of the house exchanges because they couldn't carry out any of the kind of land right changes. So that happened not long ago in this country. Wholesale trade, education, transport and warehousing. Those are the kind of businesses that are rising to the top of those attacks. These are 2022 Q2 trends, so not out of date. Fairly recent. And again, away from those large organisations that are able to afford, 1, defences, and 2, they're going to incur more effort in chasing the attacker down. They want to avoid any comeback, don't they? That's the kind of general trend. It is getting down to smaller businesses. Moving on, how much does an attack? How much does an attack cost for a small business? So there's a number of factors here, but interestingly, and I think the salient point is the ransom is not.
It's not the main.
It's not the main
cost.
So typically, the ransom will represent around 20% of the cost to the business for full recovery. So we've done some very quick maths here, a very small and I'd say optimistic example of a attack. So if we take an average salary of 27,000, number of staff 25, annual turnover of 4 million, and the total downtime, this is where I'm saying it's optimistic, downtime of 3 days, and actually on average it's more like 2 weeks to 16 days actual downtime.
We've seen a local business down for 6 weeks.
Not one of our clients, I'd like to know.
But yeah, six weeks of downtime. And
in that time, those clients or the clients of that business are then going to be looking for alternative suppliers.
Absolutely, yeah.
They will be questioning whether they want to trade with a business that hasn't protected itself.
And going forward.
And they've got to build that trust back up again and kind of reach out to those customers again to try and get that business back. So I'd say 3 days is optimistic, but in this example, we use that. So loss of productivity is costing us £8,000 in labour and lost revenue, potentially £47,000 in lost revenue over those 3 days. So the cost per day of, on average, 18,500 and total cost over those 3 days of 55,000. Again, that's not entirely representative of the total cost, because
this is this is a very
material cost,
slimmed down version of what the total cost is, because in the example that we were talking about with the 6 weeks, they initially refused to pay the ransom, and actually all of the data, so that's HR, customer information, all of the
information about their products,
all of this went out on the internet, unfortunately.
And it's released for free. You can still download it now. And that's the point we're making on double extortion. Pay my ransom, or 1, you're not going to get your data back and you're not going to trade, and 2, I'm going to put all of your data for free, available for free download on the dark web. And that's what happens. And in that case, that sadly is what happened. They eventually paid the ransom and recovered, but a little bit too late by that point.
I mean, all the information's out there, and then another factor to take into account there is if the data is then leaked out.
That's your customers, or is their customers' data?
There's fines as well.
Yeah, so the ICO may need to be involved. So it's not just the ransom that's the cost. Well, another interesting point on the ransom itself, these attackers are looking for an amount an SME can pay. So they do their research before they launch this kind of attack. They're not going to say, go to a 4 million turnover business and say, I want £1 million, please. They're going to say, well, on average, that business is going to be holding £300,000 in its account, and we'll ask for 100,000. One, they can afford to pay it at a stretch, and they may be able to afford to pay it. And that's what they want. They want that money quickly. So they're not going to ask for money that you can't afford. They're going to ask for a small amount of money in relation, in the grand scheme of things. Why don't we hear about this? Why aren't we hearing about SME attacks? Well, it's embarrassing. So typically, what you'll see is the ransom will be paid, the business will recover.
They won't report it.
They won't report it. They don't want to attract the attention of the ICO. They don't want to tell their clients, although they should, because it's just embarrassing. Nobody wants to broadcast that. It's also not very interesting for newspapers either. If it's a small business, generally speaking, you're talking about a very small local area. Yeah, it's not going to make national news.
Yeah, exactly. And if it doesn't affect everybody, the newspapers aren't interested in reporting it. So unfortunately, it's not reported there either.
Yeah. So when looking at the cost of attack, the ransom is not the entire cost. It's going to represent about 20% of the cost. The ransom is going to be something that you can afford at a stretch, because they want the money and they want to make a demand that can't be met. And 3, it will affect your customers as well as you. And along with that, there's a duty of care question, but also you may lose customers because 1, you lose trust, and 2, they'll have to go back to shopping around in the market to find your service potentially during your outage. And as I said, that example of 3 days, very lenient, more likely 2 weeks, depending on your backups or whether you pay that ransom.
It just occurs to me, some of you might actually have some questions that you want to post. So there is next to the leave button, there is a Q&A button. Yeah, don't use the leave button, but there's a Q&A button. So feel free to post any questions at all. We'll try to cover a lot of those at the end. There's a section for us to
Q&A section. Yeah. Sorry, I was mentioning that. Okay. Next trend. Is insurance. So what are we seeing with insurance? Dan works with our clients directly every day. What are we seeing there?
Well, so a lot of my clients, they send me the insurance forms to fill in on their behalf. So what we'd see sort of 2-3 years ago would be half to less than the requirements that we're seeing in cyber insurance nowadays. So there's the forms are laid out differently, but the tick boxes are definitely growing. So the 2 main things that we're seeing that insurers are asking for now, though, is suitable EDR, which is endpoint detection and response, which is a more advanced type of antivirus. So traditional antivirus is no longer good enough, and also ongoing staff training. So training staff once a year isn't defined as suitable enough anymore. They
constant training.
So regular constant training.
What I find interesting about that is if the insurance companies are asking for it, they know it reduces risk.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it means it works.
Yeah.
And a lot of them now are making it a requirement for insurance. Another important point to mention on cyber insurance is typically it will only cover recovery.
Yeah.
So it's not going to cover your reputational damage. It's not going to cover loss of trade. And another interesting point is not going to cover your further mitigation. So, okay, they'll help you recover, get your systems back up and running, pay the consultants to recover your network and get you back to a trading state. But it doesn't cover the protections you might need in the future,
which is really important to consider, because once you've shown attackers that you're a target and that you will pay, or even that your systems are vulnerable in some way, you're essentially put on a list.
Yeah, your card is marked, and statistically, Hiscox recently released some statistics on this. So half of the people that suffered a breach suffered 6 further attacks in the time after that. So that really goes to show, if you've been attacked and it's a successful attack, your card is marked, you're going to be attacked again. So you do need to put those mitigations into place. That's what we're seeing with insurance. So
yeah, and obviously they can't cover you for any reputational damage. It's not quantifiable.
Yeah.
And interruption, again, it's just not.
It might be covered under business interruption insurance. However, I will also see a lot of exclusions, particularly for cyber attack, under business interruption insurance. So again, it's going to cover you for recovery. It's not going to cover you for making things better afterwards. And it's not going to cover for the real cost, which is reputation and interruption. The recovery is almost kind of a smaller part compared to the other elements.
Yeah. So it's still really important to have cyber insurance. I want to make sure that that's also understood. It's definitely important to have cyber insurance, but I spoke to a client the other day actually, and they knew of another business similar to theirs who'd been breached, and when they went to the authorities, the response was, well, you've got cyber insurance. So so there's no help from authorities either. Again, it's important to have cyber insurance, but it's much more important to
do something about it before.
Have things in place before you get into that situation. That's extremely the key.
Another point I suppose we should raise here is cyber insurance and how you access their recovery assistance should be part of your breach plan. Every business, and certainly something that we recommend, should have a incident response plan or breach response plan. It's much better to have a plan of what to do if you suffer a breach and not need it, than have a breach and then need a plan. So that plan should include your insurer's details, your legal team's details, because you may have to talk to your clients, and there may be legal consequences. Your marketing team, strangely, you might have to make some communications regarding that, or marketing communications team, and also, of course, your IT partner, and details on how the backup is recovered and things like that. But it's part of your incident response plan is your insurance details and your legal team's details. So that's what we're seeing in insurance. Interesting that it's changing so rapidly, especially over the last.
And I think we'll see a lot more requirements.
I think we are actually also seeing that as well for some industries. They are asking for a SIEM, I always pronounce it wrong, SIEM platform, which we'll cover later on. It's another new technology.
Sorry, and just to touch quickly as well, there's a lot on it. It's just, but we're also seeing, it ties in closely with insurance, but Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus, we're seeing a lot more requirement for Cyber Essentials, companies to see other companies adhering to that cybersecurity framework. We as a business work towards Cyber Essentials as well, like all of our.
So we'll guarantee a Cyber Essentials. As clients, you should know, if you're under our managed service, we'll guarantee you'll pass a Cyber Essentials audit, and we have a managed cyber service which will guarantee Cyber Essentials Plus. We ourselves are, of course, Cyber Essentials Plus, and in fact exceed that by some margin, because we see ourselves as a target too. So another thing of Cyber Essentials provides you £25,000 worth of breach cover. So if you suffer a breach and you're Cyber Essentials compliant, they'll actually give you 25 grand towards the recovery. Again, not mitigation. So that's what we're seeing on insurance. Yeah. Remote working. Obviously, big change over the last couple of years. Obviously, a lot of us got used to working from home, and I think working from home is now, part of the new normal. And that hybrid model is being adopted. We've adopted it, and it's being adopted by many of our clients. So that's not going away. And what does that mean for your cyber position?
So home working it's great. Obviously, as you mentioned, we've adopted it here. It's great for staff. It's good for work-life balance, but it's really important that it's done correctly, done properly, because with the home environment, it's a completely different kettle of fish from the office environment. So with the office,
controlled.
It's controlled. When people come to work, they expect to use work devices. The network itself will be protected by perimeter firewalls, things like that. We use WatchGuard as a client, so you'll be aware of that.
It's a much more controlled environment, and it's a single site.
Yeah,
I've got one business in a location, and I've got complete control over the security policies and framework inside that building.
Everything coming in and out is monitored. We know whether people are on Facebook or not, things like that.
But as soon as you kind of spread that out over 10, 20 houses, well, we're not just supporting one site anymore. We're supporting all of the infrastructure in those homes and all the devices in those homes, because they all have an impact on the security position of the user in that home. So you'll see vulnerabilities for smart home devices now affect the user, and in fact the business that the user works for, because it's related, it's on the same network. So there's a much larger surface to attack and a lot more vulnerability. But it's not something that's going away. I think everyone's adopted it to some degree, and the flexibility it offers is huge. So it's something that we need to embrace, but we do need to do it properly. So no using personal devices. We use
it should be managed company devices, even in the home, because even though you're on a network with other unmanaged devices, the point is that device is managed. It has the correct antivirus or endpoint detection response software on there, the monitoring tools, and also there are ways that we can then protect that device in spite of it being on an unmanaged network.
And that's where we're looking at, we deploy different tools. So where we look to different tools to deploy for those environments. So instead of, it doesn't completely replace a WatchGuard, but we can mitigate the risk with things like DNS filtering. They'll stop users at home or on private networks accessing malicious websites or websites that are infected with malware or ransomware. So the tool set's changing to cope with that. That's what we're seeing with remote working. It's a slightly different tool set, and a broader,
it's a bigger surface area.
Bigger surface area to cover. So there we go. That's remote working. Moving on, the arms race. So going back to the previous slide, the tool set needs to evolve. These criminal organisations are now a business. They're making money and they're investing in their platforms and their technology, and they're working their way around the mitigations that we've had in place. The mitigations we've had in place for many years are becoming not suitable. We need to evolve this. So things like the EDR platform, DNS filtering, further user education, those kind of things need to keep up with their investment.
So I mean, here at Nettitude, every client, we audit them every quarter, and part of that process is to make sure that we can't, technology doesn't wait for anybody. So whilst technology moves ahead, so do these methods of attack, because again, we've talked about how lucrative it is. And really, that's what it's really important to just make sure that we're always aware of where we are now, what things are going to look like in the future, and that we're always ahead.
We're re-evaluating the position.
Yes,
it's I suppose that's the other trend, is it's moving faster.
Oh yeah, much faster.
We're even seeing MFA or multi-factor authentication, which is a must, and I hope everyone watching this webinar has that enabled. We certainly advocate that you do. And as a form of protection, it's great. It does a very good job, but we're now seeing attackers working away around multi-factor authentication. So if you have text message multi-factor authentication, that's probably not suitable, because we're seeing, well,
we read a case where somebody ran into a phone shop, and they grabbed the manager's tablet. They'd already socially engineered the PIN code from the manager, and they went outside and started.
Well, from that point, they can then change phone numbers to different SIM cards. So if your multi-factor authentication is tied to your mobile phone number, then if I can find out your name and the type of phone you're on, or indeed if I start at the telephone numbers and the names that I've got from the manager's tablet, then I can work out backwards from there a list of targets, and I can control where their text messages go, so I can redirect that to a different SIM. And that's just one of the methods we're seeing for MFA bypass. Those attacks are evolving all the time. So
MFA is important. It's a standard. It's a new standard. It used to be username and password. Now it's username, password, and MFA. It's definitely a standard, but it's being aware that if there's a slight chink, someone will find it. And
it's adopting a layered approach. MFA is one of the layers. Your EDR platform, your firewall, your DNS filtering, your user education, all of it builds up your defences. It's not just one thing. You can't just turn MFA on and everything's hunky-dory. You've got to constantly reevaluate it and look at what those risks are. And that's what we're doing all the time for our clients. We're members of a number of advanced alert networks that give us the heads up on the latest threats that are emerging and how to mitigate those risks. And we do that on your behalf. We're looking for what's coming up on the horizon. I suppose that leads us nicely onto what do you need to do, and what are we doing?
So so basically, data responsibility. So we are information security. That's Nettitude. What we do for our clients is we provide insights into as Adam mentioned, what are we seeing, getting the advanced alerts and all the rest of it, and feeding that back to you, who is the data owner. So it's your data, you own the liability. If the business gets breached, ultimately it's unfortunately it affects you the most. From that, from the information we provide, you then set the budget on how much you want to invest into the mitigations, which then feeds back into your information technology team, which is Nettitude, and then we implement the solutions with the custodians of your data. And then again, from the mitigations we've put in place, we'll have more information, which then feeds the cycle, and gradually this is how we are able to stay on top of.
So it's really, we can make you aware of the risk, and we can show you what we need to do to mitigate that risk, but ultimately that responsibility lies with you, and the budget lies with you, and we need to work together to make a sensible plan to make that or reduce that risk. And then once we've agreed our plan, we can then put those mitigations in place. So that's the first step of what do you need to do? Well, we need to get an understanding from the top line, or top of the business, that security is an issue that we need to do something about, and possibly invest in. It should be clear though that some of these mitigations don't have any cost at all. Things like multi-factor authentication, we don't charge for implementing that. We see it as an absolute bare minimum requirement. So we'll roll it out for free, and train our users on how to use it. So it's not just budget; it's also
adoption as well.
Adoption and kind of buy-in from the management team to make sure that these things are understood and reflected in the rest of the business. So that's what you need to do, is have an understanding. So what are we doing? So we've talked about those attack vectors. very cyber term.
Yeah.
Those methods, the ransomware and the business email compromise. Number one, we are rolling out endpoint detection and response as a product called SentinelOne. It's the market leader.
Yeah.
So it's been the market leader for 2 years now. And the difference is it works on, well, we'll go into the differences in a second. So that's the number one. We're rolling out SentinelOne as a new standard.
Yeah. Attackers taking advantage of work shifts. So when an attack happens, and everything gets encrypted, the attack probably actually started about 3-4 weeks ago. So that's when they've got into the system. They're having a look around, seeing how much you can afford, seeing what are the busiest times and when is the opportune moment to actually initiate the attack.
Yeah, they'll also be opening extra backdoors,
Absolutely.
disabling backups, disabling monitoring, just to give themselves the best chance possible of inflicting damage.
Yeah.
But they're not going to kick this off at 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning.
No,
it's going to be 2 o'clock in the morning on Sunday.
Yeah.
So it's going to be when nobody's watching or less people are watching. So we're mitigating that by tying in a 24/7, 365 security team that works using the endpoint detection response platform to detect those breaches, and then do something about them and recover that as fast as possible. The third part,
staff being targeted as a weak spot. So we've over the past 20 years, the investment in technologically based mitigation has been huge. There's charts out there, but you'll see it's up there. And then the investment in staff is
staff training
the same.
Yes, cyber training specifically.
But that has caused a problem, and that is that now we're seeing a lot more phishing. Phishing is a new thing. It's voice phishing, where somebody will phone up to gain access. Social engineering, and it's a weak spot. It's a massive weak spot, and so implementing security training, phishing simulation, and just providing a training platform is a huge piece of the puzzle.
But people, you can put as many kind of technology responses in as you like, but if your people aren't aware of what they should be looking for the security risks, then they're always going to be the kind of the weakest part of the chain. So
it's just about arming them, making sure they have the tools internally, and just really empowering staff to
being, when it comes to security culture, being aware of those risks and not taking a request for money at face value. So those are the three main responses to the biggest threats we have. Again, it's a layered response, is vastly simplified. But I think the real key part here is the 24/7 response. Having a security team monitoring and able to respond on a 24/7 basis is a big deal. It's something that is now becoming a requirement for SME or SMB business.
And previously only, again, going back, it used to be enterprise only, but now we're able to actually deliver this to SMEs at a reasonable price point. So should we go on to talk about
EDR? I'm going to get a little bit technical now. Just a little. So endpoint detection response, this is SentinelOne. This is the new breed of antivirus.
So what's the difference between this and what we would traditionally be using, which was of course Bitdefender?
Yeah, Bitdefender, great product. Market leader for a very long time, great detection rates, but it is signature based, and what that means is it detects viruses via a method of inspecting a file and then saying, is there anything in that file that I recognise as a virus? So it's a signature, and that signature file is updated on a regular basis, and generally the better the antivirus, the more regularly updated that library of signatures. Bitdefender is very good. It's very good detection rates, but what it can't do is detect behaviour, and that's where we're seeing a difference with EDR, is that this software is sophisticated and it can look at not what the signature is in the file, but what behaviour does that file exhibit. So is it encrypting files? Is it moving files? Is it writing over files in strange locations? Those kind of things. And I won't bore you with the technical details on it of how that works, but it's very clever, and it's more about behaviour rather than a signature. It also means, because it's behaviour based, it can detect what's known as a 0-day threat. So a virus that's never been seen in the wild before, therefore you can't collect the signature for it. It can detect those as well, because again, it's looking for the behaviour of the virus, not
what's already happened.
So it also collects all that information and puts it in a central repository, global repository, so that other businesses that are using the same platform can benefit from the lessons that the SentinelOne platforms learn in other breaches. So it just gets stronger and stronger.
But we've actually run this tool in the office.
We did a little test to see how good it was a while ago now, and we got a virus. We put it on a laptop, an air-gapped laptop, so there's nothing to do with our network. It was on a 4G dongle, and we let that virus encrypt that laptop and make it unusable. And up popped a ransom note. And we ran the SentinelOne on it, and it immediately detected it, disabled it, and then the SOC team jumped in and recovered all the files, using SentinelOne as the platform to recover those files. And I think it was 23 minutes, we had a complete recovery of the laptop, clean, no virus, and all the files unencrypted. And that's the other good point about SentinelOne, is it's not just detecting the virus and removing it, it also can undo the damage that the virus has done. So if it's encrypted files, it can recover those files and bring back the unencrypted version, and it can even do that with system state. So a good ransomware virus will not just encrypt your files, but it encrypts the operating system, and it'll make the computer basically unusable. It will recover that part as well.
So it's almost essentially another backup.
Yeah, so it's just a live flying backup that's running all the time with any file that's changed. Really clever, and it's an instant response. We're not looking to recover from backups. We are instantly recovering that machine, and it can do things like isolate it from the network. So these are the benefits of EDR. There are lots of EDR platforms. SentinelOne just happens to be the one that we've chosen, but it is the market leader, has been for a couple of years. And I think on the latest test, it has, I think it's 100% detection rate on the MITRE test. So it's good, does what it's designed to do.
And obviously the 24/7, 365 SOC response.
You wouldn't be able to do that with traditional antivirus. It's one of the main features of EDR. So that's EDR, that's what we're doing, well, as part of our mitigation plan. The next part is user education.
So obviously we've talked about how staff are being targeted a lot more now. So this is our response to that. We're rolling KnowBe4 out with all of our with many of our clients. The idea behind KnowBe4 is well, there's many parts to it, but basically we will send out phishing campaigns. We will try to capture,
try and trick your users.
Try to trick your staff into clicking the links, and then we target those staff members for additional training. The benefit is, first of all, they see examples, real world examples of what they might see
from a real attacker.
From a real attacker, absolutely. And then additionally, through the training, a new culture of instead of if you think you've made a mistake and sort of thinking, oh, I'll hide that and keep quiet. We want to change the mindset to actually, I think I've made a mistake, I better say something quickly. It's really important. The quicker that we are made aware of something possibly happening, the quicker we can jump on it and solve the problem. So it's really about understanding that anyone, I can fall for a phishing scam if it's well crafted enough. It's not, you don't need to be an expert to avoid these things. You can't be an expert in avoiding them. They are designed to trick people. So having examples of them come through, training people.
It means that training is really targeted on the people that are the weakest. That's the right way of doing it. It's also got a complete platform of video training, and some businesses roll it into their staff onboarding, so that there'll be a quarterly cybersecurity update to their training, and that's recorded. There's a training or learning management platform in there, so you can see that all of your users have completed their training. And again, it's in the insurance documents now. You've got to prove that your users have had regular training. So it's a really good solution. Again, it's the market leader and well deserved. It's a very, very good product.
We actually have some stats here as well.
Yeah.
So we see, dramatic improvements with Know4. Initial campaigns sometimes yielding 40% click through, and then that drops down to 10%. At around the 3-month mark.
Yeah. So this an example on the right here is an actual live example. It was a real life example from one of our clients. So from the far left of the graph, you can see that was their initial click through rate. And the next time they were better, they learned from their mistakes and their training. But what we'll do is we'll make these phishing scams look even better. Yeah. So the first one will be quite easy to spot, and we'll train the users on how to spot easy ones. The next one we send out, we'll make it just a bit harder. So it's a bit harder to spot. You'd have to have a more trained eye to see it. So that's why you'll see the waves in that graph, because we're making it harder, and then they're getting better at spotting the harder ones. And then we'll make it even harder, and over time that will drive down. We're never going to get to zero, but overall the level of knowledge for the users is going up dramatically.
Significantly reduces the risk of one of the team members falling for a phishing scam.
Yeah. So an email is still a threat. It's still number one, but it is decreasing because we're seeing more stuff like ransomware and software vulnerabilities becoming a problem. So emails and email training and general cybersecurity training and building that cyber aware culture, really, really important. It's not just email. It also has a feature whereby we'll have USB sticks, and we can leave some USB sticks around the office. The correct method for, if you find a USB stick in the office, is not to put it into your computer, because it may well be infected. So we can track who plugged that USB stick in. Again, train that particular user on, maybe that's not a good idea, maybe you should hand it into the IT team, or have it scanned before connecting it to your machine and potentially infecting that network. So that's that bit. Staying ahead, what's next? So the mitigations that what we just covered there are things that we've done. We're putting those into place, and it's our strong advice that you adopt those platforms.
Yeah.
The next part is the kind of a level above. So in some industries, again, going back to those highly targeted industries, it's probably something you think about sooner rather than later. Manufacturing, local government, wholesale trade, education, mining and quarrying, and I know finance is also in there. It appears at the top of that list as well. You probably need to be thinking about further steps. So we probably would, in most cases, advise going for a Cyber Essentials Plus certification. It's a bit more onerous. It has a lot more controls,
but it just shows an adherence to a much more comprehensive cybersecurity framework, and that's really what it's about. You should meet the requirements of that framework anyway, and as businesses do, they should take on the certification, because it comes with the additional assurance, as we've discussed.
Yeah. But Cyber Essentials Plus is a step ahead of Cyber Essentials, because one of the key things is it's externally verified. So an additional body inspects the network and makes sure that we are in compliance. And I think that's a really good idea. I don't want to be checking my own homework. So we want to have a industry kind of body inspect and make sure that everything's as it should be. I'm actually very proud to say that we've got one of the best pass rates for our clients that the partner that we use has ever seen. They know that typically, if they go to a new client, they're going to have 2 visits before that client's compliant. They'll do our clients with one visit, and they'll pass, because we know how to get that client through that certification.
Yeah.
The other part is SIEM. I alluded to it earlier very briefly. SIEM is the next thing that you're going to see on insurance forms. So SIEM is Security Information and Event Management. But what does that mean? So SIEM collects the data logs from everything. It will collect it from Office 365, it will collect it from your computer, collect it from your server, your firewall, your switches, anything that's basically outputting a log file, a SIEM will collect the data. Now, if you think about how many items appear in those log files, on
Millions.
Yeah, so daily, your network will generate millions of entries in those log files. There's no way on earth that a human could go through these, but these SIEM platforms are using AI and machine learning to condense that down to this set of events looks suspicious, this needs investigating by a human. So that's what it does. It boils it down from millions of events down to hundreds of events that can be inspected by, again, 24/7 SOC team, look at those and say, this is suspicious, it needs further investigation, or oh, this is the behaviour of this is the normal behaviour of this type of software. We can park that and call it a false positive. This is widely seen in enterprise now. We use it where clients have a elevated risk in their industry, or they're holding a lot of personally identifiable information
or proprietary information. That's the other thing is, if you own patents to things and you that's the core of your business. A SIEM is extremely important in protecting that.
Yeah. And so what kind of behaviors are they going to look for? Well, again, it's behavioral based. So it's going to say, John normally logs in at 8:45 on Monday and logs out at 6 o'clock, and he does that 5 days a week. But why is he logging in at 3 o'clock in the morning in Spain? What's up with that? Is that a real event? Is that really John, or does that need investigation? Or why is Steve copying terabytes of data at 2 o'clock in the morning? So it's not just looking for software vulnerabilities, although it does also look for some software vulnerabilities, but also what's going on the network, and does it need further investigation from the SOC team, and then further elevation through to actual engineer on site. There's something up here. And then this can raise those alerts to the management team.
And this ties into what we discussed earlier with the time frame of a ransom attack. So we talked about how the attacker will gain entry 3-4 weeks prior.
Yeah,
that's the answer. Yes,
SIEM is the answer to that bit. So think about the EDR platform as detection and response. Noticed it's happened and you can respond to it. SIEM is I'm detecting it before it's even happened and stopping it at the gateway.
Yeah.
These are what we're seeing as the future for our kind of standard recommendation. Again, it's coming, the price point's falling slowly, and it's becoming more and more available to small business, and that's a good thing. It's what's needed. It's sort of like an immunization for your network, really. You're protecting it before the attacker arrives.
Right, and then
there we go. I think we've reached the kind of end of our presentation on what we're seeing as trends. Does anyone have any questions?
Okay, so what's the difference between 24/7 365 SOC and SIEM? Oh yeah, okay.
So they work in conjunction with each other. The difference is 24/7 365 SOC is a security operations center. It's a team of people, real people, qualified people that are monitoring the outputs from both the EDR platforms and the SIEM platforms, and then responding to it so they can actually recover from that breach. So that's the difference.
That's completely different. SIEM is the AI behind it. It will be able to read those millions of logs, and as you say, output actions for humans to then actually investigate.
And the SOC team are those humans.
So they do work in tandem with each other.
Yeah.
Is there a major difference between Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus, and who should have CE Plus?
Yes, there's a big difference.
Yeah, there's a considerable difference between the two. So Cyber Essentials Plus is it requires a lot more tools. So and it's vulnerability scanning tools. So you might have heard in the media pen tests, things like that, penetration testing, which is they will get, a company tests another company's ability to defend against an attack. But that's become a buzzword, but there's a step before that, which is really the vulnerability scanning and mitigation part. Mm-hmm. That's where we come in. So we come in at the stage before a pen test is carried out, and that's where Cyber Essentials Plus comes in. So it's a much deeper set of standards.
Yeah, so it's a much broader framework. Yeah. So the primary difference, a few primary differences. One is externally verified. Mm-hmm. Cyber Essentials is a self-certification. So as long as you fill out a form truthfully, which of course we always do,
and you meet a smaller set of
so self-certification. It's a smaller set of questions and requirements, so it's not as in-depth. And three, the biggest one is the vulnerability, as Dan just said, vulnerability scanning. So that requires specialist software.
We use one called Nessus.
We use the same tool that the Cyber Essentials Assessor will use to do the certification. It's a product called Nessus, and it looks for software vulnerabilities on everything on the network. So again, not just your computers, or it does do your computers, but servers, network switches, firewalls, printers,
outdated firmware, things like that.
And anything that's connected to the network, Nessus will scan it and work out whether there's a vulnerability in it. And then we can mitigate that and patch it. And you've got to have everything patched up before you'll pass the Cyber Essentials Plus certification. So,
and we actually carry on these. So you need to meet Cyber Essentials Plus at a point in time.
Yeah, it's like an MOT.
Yeah, but we actually make sure that if a client is Cyber Essentials Plus certified with us, they are certified throughout. We continuously do the scans. So a typical approach would be do the MOT once a year. Well, that's not much good if those vulnerabilities appear 2 weeks later. So we don't do it like that. We do a perpetual verification, and we are always looking for those vulnerabilities and patching them as they come out. And who should have C+? So that would be,
I think we covered that a little bit earlier, really. There's some high target groups, so manufacturing, finance, oil and gas is one of them.
Yeah.
The ones we listed earlier are the primary, but really, if you're holding personally identifiable information, and any quantity of it, so that's people's names and addresses, dates of birth, stuff that could mean that they suffer a loss if that data was available, then you need to be looking at Cyber Essentials Plus. Cyber Essentials is I would say, the bare minimum for any business, and Cyber Essentials Plus is a kind of a responsible step forward.
Okay, I think that was everything.
Any more questions, anyone?
That's great.
I think we're good.
Thank you very much
for
joining us.
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. We'll be doing these on a regular basis. Yeah. So, and as and when new threats appear on the horizon, or updates need to be broadcast, we'll be keeping you up to date. Keep an eye on your email. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.